Hi everybody, it's Amy and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. I hope that you're doing well. Let me know how you're doing in the comments. Today we are doing my June reading wrap-up, all the books that I read in the month of June. And as we are getting into this, like I said, let me know how you're doing and definitely let me know what your favorite book from June was. I had a really good reading month. I didn't have any 5 stars, but I did have a lot of 4 stars, so in my opinion that is really solid. And I had like an interesting variety of books, so it was a really good reading month overall. I am like starting to get like steam in my glasses. I am like sweating. It is hot. Our AC has been a little bit like off kilter, just not cooling like it should. So hopefully we'll get that fixed. It's hot in Florida. I am definitely like trying to kind of get into the summer vibes and just embrace the heat. If you are like in the south or in like a more tropical climate or anything like that, you know what I'm talking about. But if you're feeling the summer heat, definitely leave like a sun or like a flame emoji in the comments so I'm not alone here in this heat. But let's get into this reading list. I'm really excited to talk about these books with you. June, again, was a really interesting reading month. This was Pride Month, so I have a lot of like queer books. This was also me getting into my pirate summer, so I have some pirate books in here as well. So we're a little bit like all over the map. And I'm starting with a literary fiction, and that is The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle by Matt Kane. So this is a really like heartwarming and emotional story about an older gentleman who lives in the UK. He is a postal worker, and he's asked to retire at the age of 65. So leading up to this birthday, he's like, I really just need to reclaim my life and find myself. And so he goes on this journey of self-discovery, trying to find his long-lost love from childhood. So this is about coming out as a gay man, older in life, and it's definitely about the different struggles that queer people go through. It was just a really like heartwarming and emotional story. This was definitely about him making friends along the way. There's some really great side characters in here as well. So there are some maybe triggering things in here. I would maybe look those up, but it's kind of more of just like the harsh realities that people faced, especially in the past and even today, about, you know, being of a queer identity. So just be aware of those things. But I found this to be just really moving and I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars and would definitely recommend if you want a more like heartfelt and more emotional, but very heartwarming literary fiction. Next up is an arc that I read of a book that came out earlier in June, and that is Crueler Mercies by Maren Chase. This is from the Bindery imprint, which, if you're not familiar with that, it is a publication that is basically a collection of like TikTokers and publishers who are trying to find unique stories and authors and promoting their books. So what I have read from this imprint has been really great, and Crueler Mercies is definitely no exception. This is a dark but historical fantasy. It kind of has like medieval vibes. We're in like dark castles and sort of these bleak circumstances, but it's all surrounding a main character named Vita, who is a princess who is locked in isolation for pretty much the majority of like the formative years of her life until she's like 20 years old. And so she faces a lot of abuse and trauma within this isolation. But around age 20, she is basically rescued by this man who is trying to take over her father's kingdom, and he's kind of forcing her into this arranged marriage with him. And so basically she's being treated very cruelly by these different men that have come into her life. And it's all about her just kind of being used as a pawn within these political power struggles. It is all portrayed in a really realistic way, despite this being kind of, it's more of like a lower fantasy. The magical element is not like a huge part, but this is more of like a fantasy sort of world where these like dark kind of island kingdoms. It definitely reminds me of like the kind of dark Isles of like the UK and things like that. It definitely has this brooding sort of feel to it. But even with all of the darker elements of this book, there are still moments that feel really hopeful and kind of bring light into the story. And that definitely comes with the relationships, the friendships, and the sapphic romance that our main character has. And it just really shows like how you can find love and friends even in really dark times. And you know, I loved how nothing was really like glamorized. The war was definitely like bleak and it was just trudging along. It definitely was not this like glorious heroic thing. And seeing just how the female rage within this of just being wronged and having to kind of rise up for yourself, it definitely was empowering amongst all of this kind of chaos and, like I said, these darker themes and elements. But I just really found this very moving, and I was just kind of staring at the wall by the end of this book. I was kind of surprised by the ending. You might not be. I personally was, but I really enjoyed this book, even though it does sound pretty intense. It was just really moving and empowering, and I really enjoyed it. And I don't think this is just like a book for women because it's like has some feminist themes. I think anybody could enjoy this book. It is definitely showing just how like corrupt people are just going to be users, and you know, it's about finding the people who actually like care about you and you know, standing up for them, standing up for what's right. And I think those are all things that people can relate to. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I would definitely recommend if you want like a historical fantasy that is a bit more intense and has like really realistic depictions of like war and abuse. I told you I was getting into my pirate era in June, and I started that with A Clash of Steel by C.B. Lee. This is a YA fantasy that is a retelling of the classic story Treasure Island, but with a twist. This takes place in like 19th century China, and we have a female main character, and kind of at the heart of it we have a sapphic romance. So we have queer representation, we have pirates. I kind of was able to like cross both lines off, or however you want to phrase that. But I really enjoyed this book. It definitely was more like YA feeling than some of the other YA pirate fantasies that I've read, but I still really enjoyed this, and it had this really cool kind of historical element to it. We definitely have a lot of like Chinese and other Asian influences, and there's even a reference to a real-life Chinese pirate queen. Yes, it was a real person and said to be like one of the most successful pirates to ever live. Their story is very, very cool. I definitely recommend like, of course, reading the book, but definitely like reading up on some of the history of this pirate. It's just really fascinating. But this was definitely like a coming of age story and really kind of finding yourself and your own identity, especially within the queer romance that's in this. It's just really like sweet and moving, but there's still like a lot of like cutthroat moments. There's definitely like politics within the pirates and everything, high seas adventures. So it has all of the things that you want in a pirate fantasy, but it has its own unique modern twists. So I really liked this. I really enjoyed it. So if you kind of want a twist, they call it a remix. It's part of a full like collection of like remixes of different popular stories. So if you like the idea of Treasure Island, but a new take on it, I would definitely recommend. And I rated this 3.5 stars. Speaking of this remix collection, I also read Most Ardently by Gabe Cole Novoa. This is a retelling of the classic story Pride and Prejudice, but this is, again, with a queer twist. So we have queer characters and a main character who is a trans man. So our main character, Oliver, who was formerly Elizabeth, is a trans man who is in this sort of coming of age era of his life, and he is basically in Regency England trying to hide as a woman, but he identifies as a man. And this was very eye-opening and a very like thoughtful portrayal of how a trans person has to navigate life if they're having to hide their identity. And I found it very informative and insightful. It definitely brought to light things that I would not have thought of or didn't know about the trans experience. And it was very meaningful to me. There are people in my life that I care about that are trans. And so it was just a really important book for me. I really love Pride and Prejudice. And so I think having it like connect with a story that I really love, but also with characters whose experiences I want to learn more about, like it was just a really cool experience getting to read this book. So we do still have a lot of the original elements from the very famous and popular story. So if you like Pride and Prejudice but want like a queer sort of retelling of it, we have, you know, our trans main character, but we also have like the Charlotte character who is a lesbian, but it's all like within this Regency England era. So just think of like historically what that would have been like. But it also like informs on like queer history from that time that things that I didn't even know about, things called like Molly houses, where it was like a place where queer people could come together in community, but they were very much looked down upon. It was even like a criminal offense to have these places and be at these places. So it was just really interesting getting to see this kind of historical depiction, but I still feel like it's very relevant for today and a lot of the queer experience, especially for trans people. So again, this was very moving and very informative to me, but in this setting of a familiar story that I really enjoy. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. My next book also has trans representation, and that is Chef's Choice by TJ Alexander. This is the second book of their Chef's Kiss series, and I definitely want to read the first one after this. I don't know why I read them out of order. I think I just happened to find this one first, but this has 2 trans main characters, a trans woman and a trans man, and it was just really funny. It was heartwarming. It was a little bit silly, but it was just a really fun time, this kind of trans representation in rom-com form. This story is about our main character Luna, who is a trans woman, and they recently lost their job, and so they're going to be consoled by their friend, and they end up running into our other main character, Jean-Pierre, who is a trans man, and he is basically going around and offering any woman $1,000 to pose as his girlfriend for a FaceTime with his grandfather. If that sounds crazy, it absolutely is, but it is so hilarious. And so basically Luna poses as this girlfriend and chaos just ensues. Basically Jean-Pierre is from this famous like French chef family legacy, and his grandfather is forcing him to cook the entire menu from his very famous fancy French restaurant in order to get his inheritance, which is a ton of money and assets. And he basically ropes in Luna to be a part of cooking all of this food. It is absolutely hilarious. It is crazy. It's really heartfelt. It is definitely silly at times. It is spicy, so just be aware of that. But I had a really fun time with this book. I thought that the connection was very genuine, and I felt like, you know, they worked through different conflicts together, and through that were bonding, and it was definitely a genuine connection, and it was just full of like love and community, and it was interesting seeing like 2 different trans perspectives and lives within the same book, and there are trans like side characters as well, and it was just really cool like getting to see like a whole community of trans people and this representation in this rom-com story. So if any of that sounds good to you, I would definitely recommend. I rated this 3.5 stars. Next up is basically my big kind of fantasy read for the month. I try to get at least one big fantasy, and they just take a little bit of time for me to read. I'm a little bit of a slow reader, but I read The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker, and this was with our book club over on the Fable app, The Appendix, and it is a little bit quiet over there, but I'm still trying to encourage people to come and join the journey with me. So we are going to be reading this whole trilogy, the Tide Child trilogy, and I really enjoyed this first book. It is definitely like a more gritty and dark kind of pirate fantasy. It definitely has its own unique language that these pirates use. It definitely took me a little bit to kind of get into it, but once I was in it, I was really enjoying it. So basically in this world, there is like a fleet of ships that is made from these sea dragon bones, and our story is more centered around a crew who is basically like condemned criminals forced to sail the high seas and solve different problems, and they are taken over by another condemned criminal named Lucky Mies, and she is a cutthroat and fierce pirate, but she kind of turns into this really cool captain that really brings the crew together. But our story is told from the perspective of Joran, who is basically the captain that was overthrown by Lucky Mies, and it is just such a unique story. It was definitely an unexpected kind of story. It has really cool world building. It is definitely the kind of this gritty and dark sort of pirate world. It's definitely like cutthroat and fierce, really interesting kind of like political hierarchy within this. And we definitely have some really interesting magic and magical creatures. Obviously we have some sea dragon things happening in the book, but we have some really interesting magical birds as well. I don't want to give too much away about that, but it is definitely a unique element of the story. But this was just a really cool pirate fantasy that has like the grit that you would want in like a more kind of intense and adult sort of fantasy. I was kind of, like I said, struggling with the language a little bit. It was more of just like, normal terms, like even just like the sun and the moon had different names in this world. So it was just kind of getting used to all the different terms that they use. But within like a few chapters, I was able to kind of navigate the language, and I actually found it easier to listen to the audiobook than just read the ebook that I had alone. I ended up having to return the book to Libby, so I was kind of more depending on the audiobook. But even with that, I was still able to follow along. I usually can't follow along with like more high fantasy with audiobooks alone, but I feel like it helped me understand the language with having like the inflections and just hearing the conversations. So if that is a struggle that you have, if you're similar to me, I would definitely recommend the audiobook or just like immersion reading. I think that would help with the language if you're struggling with that. But I don't want it to sound like it was like a deterrent or anything like that. It was just like, just getting used to it. It was just another element of the world building. So I would say this definitely has a higher fantasy tax just because of like the different terminology that they use for just everyday things. It definitely gives this really immersive feel to the book. You are just immersed in this pirate world and you just feel like one of the crew, and it definitely has like this cool found family aspect, even though there are some people who are on the outs and are plotting and betraying people. So we definitely have a lot of conflict on the ship, and our ship, the Tide Child, definitely has a lot of adventures that are coming in the next couple of books that I'm really excited about. So if you want to join on the journey, you can still, like, I think, get this book pretty quickly read. So it's like 513 pages. It's definitely a solid size fantasy, but I was able to read it within like a couple of weeks, and that's me reading other books and dealing with health issues and all this stuff as well. So I think that you could probably read it within a week if you're like a regular reader. So if you want to read the first one and join us along for the journey with the rest of the trilogy, definitely do that. I would love to come and see you over on the Fable app with us. So if you want some buddies to read some cool pirate fantasy with, definitely join us. But I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It was just a really cool, like, gritty pirate fantasy, and it just like scratched that itch that I needed, and I'm really excited about the rest of the trilogy. My last book is an arc that I was kind of late to reading. It came out June 24th, and that is A Legionnaire's Guide to Love and Peace by Gideon J. Chase. This is a really unique romantasy that I would almost just call like fantasy romance. I don't think that the romance was like the main focus of the story, but it's definitely a major plot point. But we basically are starting out with our main characters, Kat and Emery, who are battle partners. One is the shield, one is the spear. They've been fighting together for a few years. They've built a relationship. They decide to have a one-night stand before this epic battle that everybody is so sure that they're going to die in. They are fighting off the demon lord who's trying to take over the world, and they're fighting back his minions back to the mouth of hell that's opened up in the world. It is this big kind of epic scale of a battle, and someone kind of swoops in, saves the day, and everything's kind of done. And so it's basically trying to figure out what is going on after the world is saved, and just kind of the remnants of the war and the battle. This is basically a world where it's like angels and demons as far as magic and power go. We have magical elements that are basically coins that a lot of nobles have, or Orion's magic users have, that are imbued with angelic powers. So it's a really unique magic system and world building, and we're basically in this kind of military camp the whole time. It's just navigating like rebuilding after a war, and of course navigating a weird kind of sticky romance where we care about each other, but we don't know where this is going to go. What are we going to do after the war? So it's a lot of like navigating what ifs and possibilities, and just trying to figure out where we're going to go in the future. I think that if you want something that's a little bit unique as far as romantasy goes, or maybe if the romantasies you've read in the past aren't ones that you really liked, this might be the book for you. I am not a huge romantasy person. I like a little bit of romance in my fantasy, but I feel like this was a really good balance of, fantasy, romance, and it not being like this overpowering element. and it was just like really well grounded. The characters were really well written. I thought the plot was really unique and interesting. We have some interesting politics. I just had an all-around fun time with this. So I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend if you're looking for a unique fantasy romance. Alright guys, that is everything that I read in the month of June. I hope that you enjoyed this video. This was definitely a kind of interesting mix of books, so let me know if you read any of them, and let me know if any of them piqued your interest and you're going to add them to your TBR. I definitely want to know. But if you made it this far, thank you so much. Let me know with a sunshine emoji. We're in summer, so the sun is out. I just hope that you really enjoyed this. Let's chat in the comments, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!